Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is MMA Mayhem here on the Pottscast. Of course, I'm here, Darren Potts, hosting the Pottscast, and I'm joined today with the founder and the president of Wimp to Warrior, amongst other things. It is Richie Cranny. Richie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
No worries, champ. It's always good to chat to MMA fans.
I'm excited, really excited for this one. We were talking just before we went live of a friend who went through the Wimp to Warrior program. He loved it, and I'm really excited to try and pick your brain a little bit today. But what I want to know right at the very start, because obviously you're passionate about the MMA world, passionate about MMA in general, and all forms of mixed martial arts. But I want to know what drew you to martial arts? What started that, let's call it a love affair, this passion for MMA? Where did it begin for you?
Well, it started with boxing. I went to a Catholic school in West London where I grew up, and I wasn't really drawn to regular sport, soccer or football. It just didn't really appeal to me, and I was always had that concern when I was going to senior school at age 11 that you're going to get bullied, or I always wanted to be able to look after myself. I've been in a few scraps, but it's always just protecting myself, just growing up in a pretty rough area of West London. So as soon as I saw boxing at the school, I signed up. So I did that, and it was an old school in that if you had a fight in the playground, the teachers would drag you back into the sports hall, put gloves on you, and you'd settle it in the boxing ring. So that's the way that we did things at our school. So it became kind of a way to settle arguments or whatever. So that kind of started me on my combat journey. But once I left school, I just went through the reckless teenage years of cars and girls and clubs and stuff. And but I looked at a few different martial arts back then, but it was all karate or taekwondo or kung fu. There was no MMA back then anyway. There wasn't even jiu-jitsu in London back then. And to go from what I considered being taught how to punch properly to then being retrained to throw punches from your hip in straight motions, and none of it made sense to me. And it wasn't until I was 19, a very good friend of mine who I went to school with, her brother just opened a club, and he had this new form of martial art it was called Choi, which is derivative of Taekwondo, but Master Choi, he separated from Taekwondo back in the day, went to the US and studied sports science for several years, and basically turned what his knowledge of Taekwondo into a street form of martial arts where they use a lot of sequential movements, flowing movements, but trying to get the maximum amount of power out of every technique. So you could finish a fight in the street in one move rather than 10 moves. So that was the science behind it and the theory behind it. So I went along to that and absolutely fell in love with it. And then that was it. And that martial art has pretty much evolved, the same martial art, same people, to what I do today. What's that? I was 19, I'm just turned 50. So you can do the math, it's 31 years. But so we had clinch work and striking. And the striking we do in MMA now is pretty much the same as we did back then. We were very what's the word? Advanced, I guess. And we broke away from all the traditional forms of martial arts back then. But then obviously the wrestling and the grappling, we started working on in the mid-90s, when we first started seeing the UFCs and the devastation that the Gracies had on these big guys. And there was a seminar in London, and a couple of the Gracies came over, and this would have been about 96, I think, maybe 97, maybe 96. Anyway, and they invited black belts from all different styles to come down, and there was different coaches, instructors, and you go around and train with different forms. And we just basically, myself and my two other friends that were also black belts in our style, we stayed with the Gracies all day. And from that point, we just started learning all the grappling and the wrestling, and then we incorporated that. And in 2000, we formed what was called now Pro MI in the UK, I believe it was the first true mixed martial art system. where we have everything incorporated into a martial art, and that's still what I basically teach. And that's all those techniques are basically what made up the Wimp to Warrior program as well, all those years later.
See, whenever you sort of fell in love with boxing, and then you began to progress it into various forms of MMA and everything, and it was kind of all taking off for you, and you began to have that real passion for it. Obviously, I'm from Belfast, so I know like people are passionate about football. You mentioned it in when you were over home, people are passionate about football. Was it a very sort of small niche market, I suppose, at the time in London? And for your decision to kind of pursue this, how was that received by friends and family at the time?
Not so much the martial art field, because martial arts was popular, but I mean, when we were doing it, the word MMA, the phrase MMA wasn't even used. I remember the first time someone mentioned it, because we used to hybrid training, we're just putting everything together. And someone said, they're going to call it mixed martial arts now. And I was like, that'll never take off. It's too long. They need to shorten it. But I think no one ever really questioned it. I think my parents and my family were relieved, I guess, that I had a passion and I had some focus, because when I left school, I had a terrible time at school. I had learning difficulties. I had undiagnosed dyslexia and some other stuff. And I basically left school with nothing, very disheartened. I had no self-esteem. And martial arts, as soon as I started training the martial arts, it just, I guess, finding something I was suddenly good at after failing at school, I put everything into it. And the people around me saw that, I guess, and they all supported me. So I didn't really come up against any questions about what I was doing. It was more about support, which was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things which I think is great, you mentioned West London, and it was a bit of a rough area when you were growing up and things like that. Would this have taken away your focus from all the craziness that goes on in and around the city? Were you so fixated on improving? And obviously that's worked out well for you in your life. And when I've talked to various fighters, they all have talked about discipline. And I love hearing different people's opinions on discipline in terms of different characteristics that people need to be successful in this world. Where does discipline rank in your opinion?
It's definitely in the top 2 or 3, 100%. Martial arts, the discipline that martial arts instills in people is huge, and it helps you in every evolution or every chapter of your life. It was definitely something that I had no discipline. I was very, very rebellious at school. The 2 of my closest friends when I grew up at school are both still in prison today. One got involved in different stuff and ended up murdering someone, and another guy just a different path. But I could definitely see that without this focus and this positive, what's the word, just something that I could really focus on and guide me, if you like. It was a pathway that I didn't have any positive pathways in my life. And I'm lucky that another one of my close friends who we used to hang with, he got into it as well. And then we just trained together all the time. And, even when we weren't training, we'd go out to a bar, we'd be talking about training. It became an obsession. My wife of now, I met her when I was 21, and she always talks about the pecking order. In my life, it was martial arts, my dog, and then my wife. And I don't think that's necessarily true, but it has to be that way. I think if you're going to be successful in anything in life, I think you have to have one, commitment, which is one of the other big things for me. And the biggest thing, I think, there's 3 big things, I think, is commitment, discipline, and also not being afraid of failure. Giving you that knowledge that you can embrace failure rather than steering away from it, because I think that's the biggest thing Wimp to Warrior, and I'm sure we talk about that separately, is that gives people is it takes away that fear of stepping out their comfort zone. Because martial arts, I came from a belt system, and you basically, the belt system is designed to teach you how to fail. You fail as your white belt, you fail, and then suddenly you start getting better, and you win as a white belt in sparring or whatever, and then you get drawn into your next belt, and then you fail for months until you get to a point, and then this goes on and on and on. And even when you get to black belt as a coach as well, it's the same thing. You know, you learn from your failures, and that's a massive thing that martial arts gave me, and it's something that I really try and instill in my kids as well.
One of the major topics in terms of when you fail quite often, you need that resilience to get back up and get at it again. So when you said you've like at different belt classes, you fail and eventually you get it right and so on and so forth. Maybe what motivated you to keep going? And for you as a coach, how do you motivate people that are maybe struggling with something at say a white belt or whatever to keep on pursuing that next goal?
I think it's hard to categorize because it's such a personal thing, you know, and if you're talking about classes of hundreds or students in gyms, it's hard, but I always try and isolate that person and talk to them about, you know, there'd be something in their past that's affecting the now, because that's the way it always happens. Is, you know, they think it's a particular technique that they're failing on, but there's something in their past that's reflected in the now, what they're trying to achieve, and it's giving them some negative thoughts, or you know, the voice in the head is saying this is too hard, and you know, just discussing things. And I find having such an up and down and checkered past, people always look at what I've achieved now in my life, but I've had so many failures in my life, and having that conversation with someone from a coach, explaining the things that I messed up with or things that I couldn't achieve and failed, but that is always something I think that will help and assist, and maybe not right at that second, but it gives them something to reflect on when they get home or they're in the car. Because most people, they see when they fail at something in a class, it's only them that's ever had that problem. You know, you need to explain to them, this is just part of the path, this is the process, and these failures are what's going to make you a stronger person down the line. And I think that's the key, is it's not thinking it as like John Kavanagh famously says, you win or you learn. And that's such an important lesson. And I always try and tell the guys, you know, in a sparring class, it's the guys that really have a shit time and get their asses handed to them, you know, get people rip off their gloves and get the ass storm out. They're the ones that are going to learn from that particular class. It's not the ones that you know, had the upper hand at every training session. It's trying to turn the negative into a positive. And that's, like I said, that's one of the things that martial arts teaches you, but not everyone gets it straight away. And once you instill that into them, then they can kind of self-coach themselves.
It's an incredible learning experience. And I say that from a first-hand experience. When I went in, I've always been incredibly athletic and quite fit cardiovascular wise and all that sort of stuff. And I signed up for kickboxing and this will be fun. Done really well for the first couple of months. Coach sends me to a corner at the end of every class and says, you just stretch. And I was like, why am I being the only one to stretch? And I thought I'm nuts and I'm not good enough. And it was really just my flexibility was holding me back. And you're kind of in that bubble where you don't see the wood for the trees. And you're like, this is going to help me long term. And that learning experience, even to this day, going in there as like a very good soccer player thinking, oh, this will be really easy. And all of a sudden being humbled to be sitting in a corner, stretching. I think it's an amazing learning experience. And for you as a coach, when you see somebody come in and begin to progress and begin to go up through the levels and the stages and get better and better, and you see it having that impact on your life, that must give you the satisfaction as a coach to know that you're doing something good for someone in a very indirect way, because I'm sure you've had to give out a few harsh lessons in your time as well.
Yeah, no, it is. It's an extremely satisfying position to be as a coach, and the Wimp to Warrior program, it kind of, it multiplies that sensation of that you get as a coach, of that return of, because if you think about when we were talking about belt systems and training people, you get people coming to your class as a coach, and people fall away for different reasons, but it's such a long journey. There's stages where you can see them progress and you think that's amazing, or they get a particular technique or they win a competition. But with Wimp to Warrior, you're talking about a group of people that come in with zero, absolutely nothing. They can't even do a forward roll, most of them, and then in 20 weeks time, they're stepping into a cage. It amplifies everything. It amplifies the failure and the anxiety, but it also amplifies the sensation of that they get, and you get as a coach, of satisfaction and being able to achieve something they never thought was achievable just 20 weeks ago. Such a small amount of time, and it magnifies everything. But yeah, it's for me, I'm very privileged in that I feel that I have this it's a weird one to talk about, but from coaching on Wimp to Warrior full time, and when the business got to a point where I was traveling so much, going to new gyms in the US and Canada and UK, Ireland, and I had to give my gym up basically, because I couldn't. I'm very much all or nothing, and I can't give to the people on the mats what I feel that they deserve, then I'd rather just not do it. So that was a very hard decision for me to make, and I still miss having my own gym, and I still in my head think about opening another gym at some point. But being able to know that I can still have that influence on people's lives, even though I'm not on the mats with them, but knowing that they're doing a program that I created 9 years ago, I still get that sensation of achievement. And it's not the same, but it's still something that I really cherish. And I get a lot of emails and messages from people all the time from all around the world that, they talk about their story and where they were before Wimp to Warrior and where they are now. And it's very rewarding. So I'm very privileged.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before we hit record. I have a friend who went through the program, and it really changed how he does not just sport but life, because of the teaching of discipline, the teaching of trusting in others and yourself when you're training, and lots of other experiences. And he was telling me even today, those lessons that he learned, he still uses those in all aspects of his life. And I think maybe more than anything, that's an amazing statement to make, all coming down from like training and the art of discipline and the art of learning from a particular sport. You obviously emigrated then to Australia. Was that anything to do with your job, with work, or what was the reasoning on deciding to go to Australia?
Just Australia's always been somewhere that I've wanted to visit, and I came over and I had a year off and come over and did the whole backpacking thing, and just fell in love with Australia. So brought my wife over, and we stayed another year, and I was teaching over here. I was teaching a local PCYC, it's like a YMCA kind of club in Sydney, and then we just decided this is where we'd like to have a family and bring our kids up. So yeah, we went through the whole process of applying for residency and going back to UK and then getting visas, and 3-year process. But 2003 we moved full time to Sydney, had $1,000 in our bank account, living in a shared house. But yeah, I mean, wouldn't change it for the world. We absolutely love where we live. We don't live in Sydney. We're about 90 minutes north on a coastal town. It's literally the opposite of where I grew up. Literally, it is not just the weather, but the lifestyle. And my kids, they've just got, I look at them sometimes, and when they complain about something, I think, you little shit, you have no idea how lucky you are. Yeah, it's a beautiful country, and it's one of those countries that, because it's still relatively new, and the population, if you graft and you really put your head down and work towards something, you can really make something of yourself in Australia, and that really appealed to me.
Yeah, absolutely. The friend that I talked about, he done the program in Brisbane, and no, it wasn't Brisbane. Sorry, I'm totally wrong. It's Melbourne. He done it in Melbourne.
Okay, yeah.
Melbourne. And he had a great time there. If he says things don't work out for him in Canada, he's back to Australia. That was he told me that today. But let's talk a little bit about Wimp to Warrior. Now, you've mentioned it in passing. You're the president, the founder. Where did the idea come from? And tell any of my listeners who maybe don't know what this program is, tell them a little bit about what it actually does, what they will learn, and what goes on behind the scenes.
Sure. So the program is a 20-week program, so 5 months of training, where you train 5 mornings a week, early mornings. So the idea of early mornings, and I say early is early. I always used to do 5 a.m. till 6:30. Some gyms do 6 a.m. But the idea is that it's a time in your day where you can commit. And we have a social media hashtag whilst you were sleeping. So there's no excuses. If you try and get someone to train for 5 months every evening, they're not going to do it. Work commitments, family birthdays. It's just, whereas this is, you just get your ass out of bed early. And the idea being is you take someone with no or little experience in martial arts or mixed martial arts, and we train them like a professional fight camp. So the first half of the training program is we teach them all the fundamental movements of MMA and understanding, while doing lots of strength and conditioning work. So basically getting their body to a point where it can take impact and start live drilling. And then the second phase they go into, they start live drills and then sparring. And then we get them to a point where they can walk out and compete in one of our events, which are a sanctioned amateur mixed martial arts event. It's an amazing program, and it does so much more than people think. They think people sign up because they think, oh, I'd love to do mixed martial arts, or I'd love to step in the cage. But most people that sign up the program, especially in Australia, have heard about it and they've seen or heard or witnessed transformations, and not just physical, but as we mentioned before, it's the mental transformations that people have. And people see their friends, family members or co-workers come through this program and then completely change the way they live their life. And they're so much more positive and outgoing and confident. And that's what the program does. But going back to where I started it is, I opened a really nice gym in Sydney back in 2008. It was called Platinum Extreme. It was the first white collar, if you like now you wouldn't even think twice of it. You go into MMA gyms, especially in Australia, and they're like a regular gym. They're clean, and you have showers and you have changing areas. That wasn't the case back then. It was just, there was just places where you go to smelly mats, and it's just I was trying to bring new people into the sport of MMA, and to do that, I thought I have to have a facility where white collar workers would feel comfortable coming training, knowing that it's a clean environment, great coaches, showers, they can have lockers, change and go to work. So I started this gym, and it was great. I mean, it was good, but we're always that struggle of trying to break even every single month, because the people that came through the door loved it, but trying to expand the demographic of our potential customers was so hard because of the image of the sport. The UFC hadn't come to Australia at that point. It came, I think, 2 years later, and the UFC came and did their, because my gym was the best gym in Australia, they come and did the open workouts, UFC open workouts at my gym, and all the fighters were there. And I thought, this will be it. This is going to get people through the door. But doesn't happen. And then you have one of your fighters and he wins national title, and you put that up in your social media, you think people are going to be queuing up around the door now, and it doesn't happen because it's such a small demographic back then, especially that were watching MMA, and then even smaller that actually want to step in and do it. So I was always struggling trying to find the right solution to market what I had on offer, knowing if I had someone that comes to the door, they would absolutely love it. But how do I get them through the door? So one day I was having treatment on my back, and I was having acupuncture, and I was laying there, and my brain was going a million miles an hour. How am I going to do this? I need to get another 100 members. And then I just thought that I'm just going to train one person and train them for 5 months and try and dismiss the stigma that people have around someone that might want to compete in mixed martial arts. So take the most extreme view of MMA, which is someone that steps in the cage and fights. If I can demonstrate that anyone can do that, then the rest should be easy, you know, because the rest are just classes. If someone can do that and step in the cage and fight. So I went back to my gym and I was chatting to one of my coaches and I said, look, I'm going to do this program. I train one person. Did it for 6 months back then. 6 months, I won't charge them a cent. But we're documenting and they have to agree at the end of it that they'd step in the cage and do an amateur fight. So I put it on Facebook and we had over 400 people email in the first week saying, I want in, I want in, I want in. So that's how it started. A lot of those people were obviously just messaging because the training was free back then. But I didn't want to train, I didn't want to charge anyone for something that was unproven. So, you know, I spoke to my other coaches and said, look, you know, I'll pay you your wages being in my gym, but this is extra work. And they all agreed to do it. And I wasn't sure it was going to work until the finale. I was a very nervous coach that night because, you know, I know from, you know, 20 years of coaching that you can have someone that's a gun on the mat, you know, and it's confident, but then you put them in front of the lights and you have a few hundred people watching and they can just fall apart. You know, the mental strength and fortitude you need is way more important than the physical when you go to compete. You know, there's a saying, it's fighting is 90% mental and 10% physical, and that's so true. So taking them to their first finale, it was sold out. Well, I had some local media there and I was just so nervous, trying to hide my nerves from the athletes, my guys, because I wanted to pump them up. But it wasn't until the very first fight that, you know, my nerves started to ease, because they came out and they just threw bombs, and every single fight was the same. They all came out excited and pumped up, and then from there I thought this could be something really special. And everyone that finished it contacted me after and the weeks after and saying that how much it had changed their life, and this is something that they want everyone around them to do. And I was thinking, this isn't just about MMA. This can really help a lot of people. And also in that same formula, it's an opportunity to put MMA into a different pigeonhole of not just about people that want to fight, but something that can actually help people in their life and overcome all sorts of problems. I mean, the amount of different backgrounds that have done the program over the years is ridiculous. So that's how it started. And then from there, I run a few more programs in my gym. The third series was filmed. I did a deal with a local production company and put some more money into it, and that was aired on Fox Sports 1 over here in Australia, and that got a lot of tongues wagging as well. And then the biggest kind of trigger was when John Kavanagh come involved. So we had a couple of my guys, a lot of Irish obviously in Australia, and they were going home and telling their friends in their gyms about Warrior, and John heard about it and he absolutely loved it. And yeah, and now we're in 8 countries and we've got over 80 gyms running the program, and it's amazing. But it definitely hasn't been an easy transition. There's been a lot of struggle around this program. You know, we are where we are now because myself and the people around me have done a lot of hard grafting and a lot of sleepless nights, and because, you know, I don't want people to think that this kind of success comes easy, because it's not. You know, it's had a lot of challenges, but I wouldn't change a thing. You know, it's an amazing program to be involved with, and it's opened a lot of doors for me and the sport of MMA as well.
I think it's something that's synonymous with MMA in general, is struggle and hard work, picking yourself off the mat, the consistency that's needed to succeed, and then just having to keep going and keep going and keep going. So 2 questions for you based on what you've just told me. Where did the name come from? That's the first one. I want to know where Wimp to Warrior came from. If there's a story behind that, I want you to share that story. And then secondly, once you've seen it work that first time, you ran a couple more sessions off it before it really exploded. Did you have the vision for it to explode, or did it really just take wings and go?
Okay, two good questions. Number one, Wimp to Warrior, and I get asked this a lot, and I think it's been good and bad, the name. One, so I came up with it. It was literally, it just fired into my head. I got back from my back treatment, and I was chatting to my coach, the other coach, about it. I said, well, we'll train someone, and it just came up. I'm going to call it Wimp to Warrior. And we're like, I'm going to call it Wimp to Warrior. And then I literally went and I looked it up in the Oxford Dictionary. And I thought, well, you know, Wimp, people are going to sign up. But when you look at the definition of Wimp, it talks about someone that doesn't have the mental strength to look for change in their life. And when struggle comes, they walk away or find a different pathway. And I thought that's perfect, because that's what we're going to instill in people. You know, we want to change people's minds, strengthening their minds. And the warrior thing is the obvious, you know, it's having that warrior mentality of being able to walk through fire if you something you believe in. So that's where the name come from. I've had people come to me sometimes, you know, oh, you know, I'm not a wimp, you know, I'm not signed up to that. You know, that's fine, because that's ego talking. If you're full of ego and you can't sign up to something like, we've had people that are special forces and army and ex-police and do this program. You know, you've got to look past something like that. And I think it's become kind of almost a filter for us, that we don't get those guys coming in full of ego, wanting to do this because they see it as a fast track to their first fight. It's people that really want change. And I love it. I love the name. And I think, and to see people embrace it as well, and they walk around with their shirts, Wimp to Warrior shirts, and have their logo. So yeah, that's where it came from, and it's stuck. You know, we call it the Warrior Training Program, but the business is Wimp to Warrior. You know, it's changing people's lives from that wimp mentality into a warrior mentality. And the second question is, did I think vision? I'm a big one for vision. So when I opened my first gym, I had a vision board. When I came up with Wimp to Warrior, I created a vision board. And on that vision board, I put things that, you know, for instance, I had a TV, and I pitched for TV, and it had Wimp to Warrior written on it. And I put that, and I had no thought or plan of having it as a TV show back then. I just thought people are going to love this. It's going to become a TV show. I had a vision of Luna Park, which was the place where the big MMA promotions in Australia would go to, and if you sold out Luna Park, it was a massive success. And I had that sold out, and I did that in my second series. So I did all these things, but I never thought that it would be a program that's run in almost 100 gyms around the world. That was never my vision, and that's become a massive blessing, because, you know, I've always been, you know, been a mixed martial arts since it began, but I'm also a fan of the sport. And GSP for instance, was my favorite athlete back in the day. And the day that, if someone had told me when I first started the program that, you know, this program is going to be in TriStar, I'd be like, shut up. There's no, you're joking, you know. And then to you know, a few years later, when Connor exploded, so, you know, Connor's going to do a video and you're going to be running with John Kavanagh, I'll be like, you're talking out of your ass. It's just, I've never had that. But, you know, it's the industry's embraced it, because it's so good. If Wimp to Warrior, there's not a negative that comes out of this program. You know, so many corporate businesses, you know, they look at their optics, they're scaling, want to get to this, you know, we'll have to make some people redundant here, you know, this is going to have an adverse effect on this industry, but, you know, we need to get to our goals. In Wimp to Warrior, everyone in the industry is better off, because you've got more people coming into the sport at grassroots, fall in love with the sport, whether they keep training or not. They're going to become fans, and they're probably going to watch it and go and support local shows. We have an 80% retention as an average for people at the end of the program joining that gym that starts the program. So apart from building members, we're also monetizing gyms massively. You know, it's especially through this COVID. You know, there's so many gyms that I deal with that have been on struggle street, and I know for a fact, off the top of my head, I can name 3 or 4 that I know if it wasn't for Wimp to Warrior, wouldn't have been able to open their doors again, because it literally monetizes their gym throughout the year. So I never had the vision of what we call the B2B, the business to business. It was always about people into the sport. That was my vision of getting more and more people. But it's become a very special part of the program, and me being able to travel and be on the mats of these sacred gyms that I came through as a student looking up to, and coaches. So here's my puppy. He's just about to pull my cord out. Come here, one sec.
We got to get the pup on the Pottscast. It is now the Pottscast, ladies and gentlemen.
There we go. That's Cooper.
Oh, he's beautiful.
He likes cords. I just felt my cord and my computer being chewed. So yeah, look, it's been a complete blessing, and sometimes I still, 9 years later, I still have those pinch myself moments, you know, and like I say, I do feel very blessed about the whole thing. It's been an amazing experience, an amazing journey for me, and the people that work with me as well from years back now.
I think one of the biggest things with MMA is the growth rate and how it's growing every year. It's exploding year on year. And I mentioned I'm originally from just outside Belfast in Northern Ireland, and growing up, the only sort of mixed martial art, it was like the local church group or the local leisure center running a karate lesson a week. And now whenever I go home, I've got guys like friends of mine, like Reese McKee, who has fought in the UFC, and he's got his own gym. And then you've got like SBG in Dublin that John Kavanagh's part of, and it's really exploding in Ireland, and Cage Warriors UK and BAMA and all that stuff. And as a fan, I love it. And you've mentioned there yourself, you know, being a fan, and obviously being able not just to watch the sport, but contribute to it, and contribute to it in such a positive manner. In terms of, you've mentioned quite a lot, and we've touched on it slightly, is the mindset. And mindset for me in terms of martial arts. And I've done kickboxing, I've done a little bit of Muay Thai or Muay Thai, and Muay Thai broke me. I left that a broken man, and it really does take that mindset to go, that was tough and I struggled, but I've got to go back. And with the Wimp to Warrior program, how hard are the guys and the girls pushed in this program?
It's weird to hear this, but one of the hardest things about the program is, and I talk to people about this all the time, is literally swinging your legs out of bed at 4 a.m. And that's such an integral part of the program, is because I say to people, you know, anyone can go training when the sun is shining, you know, you feel energized and you're excited, and, you know, you've had a great day, and you go down the gym and everything's buzzing. But to swing your legs out of bed, and like some of the places, Ireland included and Canada, and it's -10 or something, and they're chipping ice off their windscreens at 5 a.m. to get to the gym. That's tough. That's tough. And then the training on top. So the training itself is tough, and the program that I designed, you know, and still run, it's a 3-phase program in terms of the content, but also the progression. And it's not just physical progression, it's mental progression as well. So we purposely don't challenge them, and we don't talk about the fight and the finale and sparring at the first stage. It's all about just basically inducting them into the world of martial arts, teaching them, you know, the etiquette, you know, bowing and being on time, and the discipline, and the movement patterns, and building them physically. And then you start just dropping in, talking. The coach's job is to talk about, you know, the upcoming finale at different stages, and then you build them up to live sparring, live drilling, and then into sparring. But the program is done specifically into build them up, not just like say physically, but mentally as well. Because I've had a series, this is years back now, but that they come on, and there was it was a gym full of guys that were up and coming, a few of them in the UFC, and you know, they thought, oh, you know, we know what to do, we're fighters. And we gave them like 40 people to start a big series. And after, I think, 9 weeks, they had like, it was in the teens, it was like 17, 18 people left. And it's because they hadn't followed the program. Their inexperience as a coach thought they have to excite people. And because they love sparring, everyone should love sparring. And they just weren't mentally ready, and people just didn't come back. So the program is tough, but it's done in such a way that they don't realize how tough they're becoming on a daily basis. You know, just going back to swinging their legs out of bed every single day, you know, committing to something that is tough. You know, your partner's saying, you know, stay in bed, let's have a cuddle, just have a day off, but you can't, you have to turn up. And it's the days that I tell people that, you know, they wake up and they're sore and they've got bruised rib or their knees sore, and that's the days normally you'd say, I'm just gonna have a day off, but you don't. You turn up regardless, and they make you mentally tougher, and you don't realize it, but it's this, you're just building blocks, and to a point where they get to finale and they hear their walkout music, the nerves disappear and they come out charging and they're excited. They want to get in there and fight. And that's such a transformation. But so the program, there's like I say, there's lots of stages, and yeah, there's days where it is tough. You know, we have conditioning days on a Friday where we do 5-minute rounds, the strength conditioning on Tuesdays. You know, the technical sessions aren't as tough in the first few weeks because you're learning basic movements. But once you start live drilling, you know, and you start putting all the elements together, it becomes very challenging. But, you know, you're not going to get the rewards of this program at the end of it if it's not challenging, if it doesn't take you out your comfort zone. And I think the fact with Wimp to Warrior as well, if you try to do this with an individual, it'd be very hard to keep that person motivated. But when you're in a class of 20, 30, 40 people and everyone's having the struggle, you know, it's that old saying that, you know, rising tide lifts all ships. You know, you'll get a few people that are on struggle street on one day and the rest will pick them up, you know, and when those people are having a bad day, the others will return the favor. And I think that they become such a tight-knit group that they're accountable to each other, you know. And I always say, you know, you can't do this without training partners. If you take a day off, your training partner can't train. So it does teach people accountability as well as discipline. So yes, the program's tough, but people thank us for it at the end, you know. And that's what the transformation's about, you know. People, whether it's weight loss or, you know, just change their body totally, but it's coming out. Friends and family can't believe when they see these siblings or whatever walk out just Vaselined up and walking into a cage and pumped up, and it's like, who the hell is this person? You know, this it's crazy. I get goosebumps when I talk about it. It's an amazing experience.
I think, you know, I would say to an extent, I could say I understand from a coaching of soccer level, more so to the extent of I've told someone what to do at practice, or when I'm coaching some kid and they do it in a match and score a goal and I feel like I've won the World Cup. I can just imagine how you feel from a coaching standpoint in a much greater scale when you're seeing person after person after person after person. And the really cool thing is, as much as there's 40 people or 30 people and all across 8 countries in the world doing this, every single one of them is an individual, and that individual is going out into their world, when they're in their own world, with this renewed mindset, this transformed mindset, this new way of looking at things. And it's just, I think it's just a crazy, cool, unique thing. And what I want to talk about now is just a little bit about the growth of MMA in general. You know, people always talk about the UFC, and UFC is the big header, I suppose. But you know, you look at LFA is doing really well, and Bellator, and so many other things. And as we talked about, the UK and Ireland, it's exploding. Ronda Rousey, for example, really put it on the map for women. Conor McGregor really opened a lot of people's eyes, especially in Ireland and Northern Ireland, where I'm from. How important is it that when these, I would say, once in a generation type stars come along, that we, I don't know, I wouldn't say back them, I suppose, but embrace them, because they're bringing eyes to the product. and more
Sure.
eyes to the product, the more fans. For someone like you who's involved in the MMA world every single day, how good, how cool, how unique is it to see the growth of the sport over the last lot of years?
Yeah, look, it is, it's, it is, and I think I always separate the two from the professional side, and what I don't see the professional side of MMA, the athletes, as the sport. I see the amateur side and the students in gyms. That's the way I always look at it, and it's something that I talked about a lot, not so much now, but one of the key things for Wimp to Warrior is showing people that can do it. Is growing up in the UK, you know, you wouldn't look at David Beckham, for instance, and go, I'm never going to be as good as him, so I'm never going to kick a ball around the park. You do it anyway. There was a grassroots part of the sport, and then you had a progression system. You could then go to Sunday League and then progress in there. And if you wanted to, then you could. But with MMA, it's always been a sport that was basically built upside down. It was professional and then a bit of amateur, and there's nothing underneath. And with MMA, people would look at Conor McGregor, or a female would look at Ronda Rousey and go, I could never do that in a cage. So they don't have that, well, I'm just going to train anyway. It was like, I can't do that, so I'm not going to do the sport. So that was always a problem. And it's something from a gym owner's point of view, and with Wimp to Warrior as well, something I really focused my efforts on, of trying to show that it's not just about becoming the next Conor McGregor. The sport can give you so much, even if you never compete. If you just train, it's the sport of MMA is the people on the mats training every single day, and the amateur side. But absolutely, it helps. I mean, being in Australia, you know, we've had, you know, Mark Hunt, obviously, with Robert Whittaker, with Alex Volkanovski now. It's helping memberships, but there's still a big, you know, if you look at people that will come in and join a gym because Alex Volkanovski's won a title, you're still talking about the people that will probably join anyway, and it's just that nudge for them to go. They're into their martial arts, they're watching the UFC, but you're not getting that crossover still. You know, the MMA, the mainstream media and still don't cover it enough. New Zealand's a little bit different, you know. Izzy over there, he's made, you know, we've got 6 gyms over there to run the program, and they're just having the best time of their lives over there. The gyms, they're just packed.
Yeah.
There's something in New Zealand that's special that way, I think. They really embrace their athletes, no matter what code they come from. Australia's not quite there yet, but yes, it definitely helps. But I think it's really important to understand the separation of professional fighting and the sport of mixed martial arts. And, you know, and that's something that I've been dealing with, being part of IMMAF for the last couple of years. Well, building the amateur side here, getting governance, trying to get sport recognition, and building pathways for athletes that come from a gym but have nowhere else to go until they're at a point of stepping in a cage at a local show. That's 3 years away. You know, there's no sport in the world that you'd start and someone say, you know, if you take Wimp to Warrior out of the equation, if you turn up to a gym and, you know, you want to, what other sport in the world would you start? And the coach says to you, basically all you've got to do is drill for the next 3 years, and then you can actually put everything together and try it, which would be MMA is in a cage. There's, you know, if you did that in football, the coach says, you know, all you can do is kick the ball around and do drills. You can't actually play a game for 3 years. It's very hard. It's very hard to keep people in that sport, retention-wise. And these are all the things that we're trying to do with IMMAF. So, again, it's great having all these superstars, but they don't necessarily help the amateur side like people would think. It's still a struggle trying to build and get new people into the sport and give them pathways. Because, you know, the Conor McGregors they're, you know, there's 0.01%ers, you know, you've got to basically give up your whole life to be someone like that.
Yeah, 100%. I think like that's so much information for me, because I'm looking at it, and you talked about Volkanovski and Whitaker and Marquand, and I'm thinking, oh, it must be exploding in Australia. But it's really interesting to hear that it's not really filtered down the
No,
way that maybe a lot of people, including myself as a fan, would have
no,
expected. That's kind of blown my
yeah.
mind a little bit. Tell me a little bit about IMMAF, what you do there, and are you finding it? Is there any resistance to what you're trying to do? Or are you finding it people are wanting to get on board and wanting to help with the progression?
There's resistance in everything I do. It's literally, it wouldn't feel the same if I did something that I didn't get resistance from. From the first gym I opened in Sydney, I had people with placards out the front trying to get the gyms
Oh,
closed
no
because they didn't
way.
want MMA in their area. It's
Wow.
just
That's
when I
crazy.
started Wimp to Warrior, I had fighters and coaches emailing me saying, this is a disgrace. You can't put people through. It's not. You're taking respect away from the fighters and what they do, and just people just don't see the big picture, what you're trying to achieve when you do these things. But IMMAF, yes, there's been a little bit of pushback because the sport has been going ungoverned, if you like, and coaches and promoters doing their own thing for a number of years in Australia, and then suddenly pull them in and say, look, we're gonna put some governance into this, and we need you to tick these boxes. There's always going to be pushback. But it's definitely got a lot easier. I got involved 3 years ago. I was asked to come on as vice president in Australia because they'd seen what I'd done with Wimp to Warrior, and they thought I could help grow it in Australia, grow IMMAF. And after sort of a few months, I recognised that I'm very, very much. I have vision in everything I do, and I want to implement things, and I want them done now, and I want to race, and I'd rather not sleep, and I'd rather make something happen. And the people that were kind of running at the time were quite slow in that way and set in their ways, and they'd set the federation up here, and it kind of been plodding along and not doing much. So I pushed to become president, and I was voted in president a couple of years ago. And since then, I've been putting a lot of time and energy into it. We've been running coaching accreditation courses now in Australia for 18 months. We were one of the first ones in the world to do it, which I think is a huge importance for the sport. I mean, there's no other sport that, parents, how can they trust someone to teach their kids if there's no formal qualification or check that they've ticked certain boxes? And also from athletes' point of view as well, we want to be able to educate the coaches and continue to educate the coaches. So that's been a big part. I've worked closely with Andrew Moshanoff, who's the technical director of IMMAF. He's been involved with Olympic Sambo, Olympic judo as well. So he's got some amazing coaching insights that I've really learned a lot from being involved. And so I love that part, and passing on that knowledge. I had 60 coaches go through the program in the first 12 months, and then COVID hit, so we're going to kick off those again. The national team, we put a lot of time and effort into the national team. I've got some great coaches now. Brian Eversole was one of them. I brought him on as our head national coach. We've had some good wins. We've rated 5th in the world now, our national team, which is massive. So there's lots of things, but we're still not recognised as a sport in Australia. So there's no support from government. There's no funding from government. So everything, I give up. I don't care, but no one gets paid for it. When we go away, we pay our own flights. When we do things, it's that's where we go back to. The Conor McGregors and the Ronda Rouseys owning all these millions, and people think the sport is massive. But when you look at the grassroots and where the sport actually is, it's a daily grind. I want to take 20 athletes to the World Championships in Kazakhstan in end of November, and I want to be able to fund those guys. I don't want them to have to do fund me pages on Facebook. So I've got to raise probably 20 grand to do that. I'm lucky enough to be in a position of authority and with Wimp to Warrior that, we're launching a scholarship program through Wimp to Warrior now. So my shareholders and my partners have come on board, and everyone that does Wimp to Warrior now. So if you're doing it in Ireland, there'll be a set amount of money that goes to the federation, the Amateur Federation in Ireland, that will then go towards funding their national team or youth programs. And in Australia, because we have so many people doing the program over here, that's going to be a huge contribution to the work I do here. But it's, you know, nothing comes easy. There's pushback at every corner. You know, some coaches, some, you know, the biggest one is, you know, is people still have that mentality of MMA isn't a martial art, it's a hybrid, and you've got to have a jiu-jitsu coach, you've got to have a Muay Thai coach, you've got to have a wrestling coach. The sport's never going to grow that way, and we're never going to get into the Olympics if we're seen as a mishmash sport at amateur level. And the biggest part of what we do is prize fighting. We're not going to be recognised as a sport. So having the coaching accreditation courses and teaching coaches from other styles how to adapt their system, because jiu-jitsu doesn't cross over straight into MMA. Muay Thai doesn't cross over to MMA. There's lots of adaptations needed. So getting people to recognise that and look at us as a sport, as a martial art of our own, is probably the biggest challenge that we have. But we're definitely getting there. I mean, it's I've got lots of big plans in Australia. I'm putting together a youth Olympic program, a 10-year program, which I'll work with coaches and athletes over the next 10 years to monitor and support them in the hope that we get into the Brisbane Olympics 2032. So I've got lots of plans that way. But IMMAF is something that I have a lot of belief and passion with, because that is the sport of MMA. You know, that's what we need to be getting behind. That's where we can take kids from the age of 12 and give them a pathway, a safe pathway of progression. And they could be the next Conor McGregor, but come through as a mixed martial artist in a governed sport with safety in mind, rather than, you know, you don't know what rules you're going to find when you turn up to a show. You know, you can't have a sport that way.
You certainly have your work cut out, but like Wimp to Warrior, you have big goals, big ambitions, you have the drive for it. And a word you haven't used, but I think it's very appropriate for you, is sacrifice. There's a lot of time sacrificed from yourself and from other people that I'm sure are supporting you to try and make all this stuff happen. And it's only going to benefit the MMA community around the world, specifically Australia and stuff where you're getting involved, but certainly all over the world. Just to sort of wrap this one up, but it's been really, really good, and I'm conscious of the time, and I've already kept you a little bit later than what I told you I would keep you. But Richie, when a fighter goes at Wimp to Warrior, so two last questions for you. So at Wimp to Warrior, at the big event, and these guys that have trained this whole time and they're getting ready to do their walkout, are you there to give them any words of encouragement, or do they have a coach, or who tells them the last thing they hear before they walk down that aisle and get ready to fight? And how would that maybe help calm their nerves?
Well, the coaching program that I basically give to coaches, you know, as I talked before, there's progression in terms of getting them mentally ready. But there's also a part where we talk about visualization drills. And whenever I go and visit a gym, I try and do it where they're at least halfway through the program. So they're either in the sparring section, or they're close to finale, or the finale's on their mind. And the visualization drills are really important, you know. And I talk about trigger points, you know, being out the back, and I get them to close their eyes and think about having their hands wrapped. If they're on the card and they're number 6, number 5 goes out, that's a huge trigger point. Your adrenaline's going to be going. The fear, the fight or flight response will start kicking in, and basically getting them to a point where they're actually been through that process several times. You know, I try and get them to do it every single day leading up to finale the week before, and go it through their mind. And then the trigger point of being told you're coming out, and you get to the doors and your walkout song. And there's talks I do about with the walkout songs as well. It's not just a song, it's something that's going to get you to a point where you're ready to fight, you know. And I tell them to never listen to that walkout song unless they're going through the visualization drills, and to only listen to it when they visualize themselves, the doors open and walking towards the cage. So there's all these things that I try and get the coaches to instill and go through with their guys. And then when I run the program, I talk about those, because they're key, is being able to control your adrenaline. And at that point, you know, they should be, the whole visualization drill is understanding that the nerves will be there, and the anxiety, and they want to go for a piss 5 times in the last 10 minutes. And that's fine. And everyone goes through it and understanding that. But when they hear that walkout music, they need to be at a point where that triggers, everything else goes, and they're in fight mode. And, you know, so that's in the program. The coaches have it there. And then, you know, I can only hope that the coaches do that. I do touch base with the coaches throughout the program, but the coach will be there at the doors with them. You know, the hands on the back of the shoulder, they're giving them that last tip. And everyone has their own kind of, whatever keywords, you know, as a coach, you get to know the person that's about to walk through the door, and you know what they've been through, and there'll be some sort of trigger that coach will know to give that person. There's a woman a couple of weeks ago that I coached, and she walked through, she was 51 years old.
Wow.
And yeah, she was amazing. She had alopecia, but for the first half of the series, she wore a bandana, and everyone thought she had cancer, and no one wanted to ask. And then she started spinning, it ripped off, and she's like, I'm just bald, you know. And at a weigh-in, she wore a wig, and then she took it off when she did the walkout. But, you know, she had kids, and I knew her trigger word was the lioness. You're a lioness. This person in the cage is trying to attack your kids. Be the lioness. And she was like, oh, but only the coach would know that.
Yeah.
You know, so there's so much I can do from being the international head coach. I can give them the tools, but the coach that's been through that journey with them will know exactly what to say to them to get them to that point that they're ready. So yeah, sorry, I've forgotten the last question.
No, I haven't asked it yet, because that one was loaded, and I was just really interested in that, like, that ingrained mentality of what someone thinks when they walk down that aisle. I always joked around, if I ever did something like that, I've already my song picked and all that sort of stuff. I just haven't quite got there yet to sign up or do anything about it.
The hardest thing with that, when I tell people, is staying focused. And I always tell my guys is, tell your friends and family not to come up to you when you walk into the cage, because we've gone through this process out the back of getting you focused and ready, and you know, and basically dealing with your nerves. And then when your walkout music comes on, you're ready to fight, and you don't want people coming up and taking you out of that zone. And then when you get in the cage, never look outside the cage. You squat down, you listen to your coach, your eyes stay in the cage. So the focus, and you can see the ones that lose focus often lose the first round at least before the corner has time with them to get them refocused, because it's so important. You can't, you're not in there to wave at your friends and family or your girlfriend. You're in there to do a job. But yeah, the whole process of finale is really important.
It sounds phenomenal, and obviously you've done a lot of work to get to this stage, because you've covered every base probably on the way. And it brings me really, really nicely to my last question for you. You've had a season filmed and put on Fox Sport. You've had Coach Kavanagh come on board. You've had shout outs from Mark Hunt. You've been in London, and you've been sharing the mats with Royce Gracie, and so on and so forth. And this question, it could be subject to change as we go further down the line. You continue your journey, but do you have maybe the most proud moment of your journey so far? Is there one that sticks out? And if so, what would that be?
Yes, I think one that had the biggest effect on me was my second series, and it's nothing to do with all the big names. They've been great. They've been as a fan, you know, they've been amazing for me to have, and as a coach as well, having coaches I really respect run my program. But for me, as a coach, it's always about the impact I have on people. And the second series of Winter Warrior, we had, I mentioned it before, at Luna Park, which is an amazing event in Sydney. And and it's broken a lot of promoters because it's very expensive to put on, and if you don't reach sort of 1,000 tickets, you lose money. And so I took a huge risk to do that. And this is a series that I was still the only person doing Wimp to Warrior. I'm the coach, I'm the promoter, I'm putting all the event together. So having that event at Luna Park and selling it out, 1,800 people, when it was the biggest amateur event in Australian history, and being able to put on an event like that people still talk about, that were involved with it, and seeing all my guys come out at that event. I remember before the kickoff, just seeing the cage there and knowing that it's sold out, and knowing that in an hour's time, this place is going to be full of friends and family, to watch these people that I personally trained for, 5.5 months. That was probably the proudest moment, and it's one that I'll always look back on as sort of like a catalyst, because that particular series, it got so much media coverage because it was such a big event, and we had a lot of people there, and I had over 1,000 people register for the next series off that one event. So that's, for me as a coach, which is what I always see myself. I don't see myself as an entrepreneur or a CEO. I'm just a coach at the end of the day, doing what I love. That to me is probably the biggest, proudest moment in my career to date. But I'm going to be on the list of people that get our sport into the Olympics. That's my next goal. And I don't care if there's a list of 1,000 people. If I'm the last one on the list, the work I'm doing now with Wimp to Warrior and IMMAF is, that's my goal. I'll retire happily when MMA gets into Olympics, and I can say I was a contributor.
Certainly big goals, and I wish you all the best. And then big goals, big aspirations. But like you said, if you didn't go through any hardship to get somewhere, you wouldn't feel like you're doing it right. You've been synonymous with hardship your whole life.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have got there. It's martial arts have given me the tools to do what I do now, and that's why I want to give back to the sport that's given me so much. Because I could have ended up in prison or something worse growing up in London, and the martial arts have provided for me and my family, and that's I want to be able to give that back to other people. So
yeah, you certainly already are. When you think about the amount of people that have came through Wimp to Warrior, I think sometimes it's when you're so engrossed in trying to make it better and do more things, sometimes I think it's nice to kind of look back and go, wow, when I'm sure you maybe have the stats somewhere of the amount of people that have came through all the programs. If you've looked back and went, wow, I've had an impact on X amount of people's lives, that's an amazing achievement. And
it's about
I think
7,000, I think, so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
7,000
My wife says
people.
to me all the time, just stop and think about what you've done. Because whenever I finish one project, I've got the next two in the pipeline. It's just the way I am, unfortunately. Yeah.
Is there no days off?
No, very rarely. But look, I'm blessed. I've got great support from my family. I've got a great team with Wimp to Warrior, supportive, and IMMAF. So yeah, we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that, and I'm excited to see what happens. But Richie, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so glad we were able to connect. I'm looking forward to getting this out in May, letting more people hear about this. For my friend back home who I'm not allowed to name, you were talking about doing Wimp to Warrior. When you listen to this, I'm telling you right now, you've got to do it and stop procrastinating. Just get it done. And
exactly.
But Richie, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for giving me your time. I understand how incredibly busy you must be. You're at home, you're working with the kids, you have puppies, you have all sorts going on. But you know what? Giving me just over an hour of your time, I really do appreciate. So thank you for coming on the show.
Listen, the Wimp to Warrior isn't anywhere without people that help support and give us a platform to tell people what we do. So I appreciate what you're doing as well, champ. Thank you.